Good afternoon and welcome to the weekly roundup with William Hellman. I'm your totally sober host, William, enjoying today's wonderful April 20th afternoon for the birds in the sky and the wonderful weather, and not for the herbal additives others might enjoy it for. All jokes aside, today's guest, in an interview I recorded yesterday afternoon, is Charles Long. He was the Republican candidate for Baltimore's 14th City Council District, which he also ran for in 2016, and in 2014 he ran for Maryland's 3rd Congressional District. So he's got a lot of experience, and he did an amazing interview, which I am so pleased to share with you all. Of course, today's show is not without a hitch. Today's show is honestly not my best work. I did not get enough ample time to plan this weekend because I had to deal with a ridiculous city ordinance that would mean I have to deal with a $50 fine if I let the grass grow any higher. And unfortunately, I didn't even get to cut that grass because I also deal with a gas mower which had spent the entire winter outside, so it's not been a great weekend. It's been frustrating, and I'm sorry that I didn't have time to plan this program better. That said, the program will be mostly normal, other than the fact that we've got no overarching topic, thus the silly title 420 special, and the fact also that the interview will not include a game segment. However, I will be doing a skit after the interview, which has been recorded today. Some things remain the same, though. For example, the segment you now all know and loathe. It's time for This Week in the News. I'm starting today's segment with a piece of very sad news. Hester Ford, the oldest living American, passed away this past Saturday at the age of 116. Hester, who celebrated her centennial birthday in 2004, was of course born in 1904. She lived to see both world wars, the 1930s stock market crash, 2 pandemics, the moon landing, and many more events that shaped both American history and the history of the world. It's no exaggeration to say she was a national treasure. She'll be missed by all Americans, but most especially by her family. Hester gave this country a wonderful ongoing gift of 12 children, 48 grandchildren, 108 great-grandchildren, and 120 great-great-grandchildren. When asked last year on her 116th birthday what the secret to her long life was, she replied, "I just live right. All I know." Wow. Those are really some wise words and something we could all take to heart and possibly live by. I just want to say goodbye, Hester. You lived an absolutely amazing life, and I'm sure many Americans feel the same way I do, in that I hope I can live a life nearly as amazing as yours. Now, before I get all misty, I want to move on to our next news item. Last Thursday, congressional Democrats began to move forward on legislation intended to pack the Supreme Court with 4 new justices, and they're making no attempt to deny it's a political move. In a press conference, Senator Ed Markey of Maine claimed that Donald Trump and Republicans broke the court when they legitimately appointed 3 new justices, and to restore the court, Democrats need to be in control again. They want to eliminate the filibuster and expand the court to 13 justices so that they can appoint 4 justices and make sure that it can't be wrestled back from their control. Representative Jerry Nadler, as well as 2 other House Democrats, joined Markey at this press conference, with Nadler saying, 13 is a nice number. 13 donuts, maybe. Anyway, Markey then further stated during a separate press interview, and this is a direct quote, that there will be public outcry to pack the court when they begin to overturn progressive legislation. I think he means unconstitutional. Republicans were quick to fire back, with many immediately pointing out that former Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who the liberals idolize, was against packing the court. Then on Saturday, Senator Roger Marshall of Kansas even stated during an interview with Breitbart News, something that we already know, that Democrats are only moving to expand the Supreme Court because they intend to pass an unconstitutional agenda stripping Americans of their First and Second Amendment rights. If Democrats succeed in this endeavor, the court will go from a 5-4 advantage for conservatives to an 8-5 advantage for liberals in the first expansion of the Supreme Court since the early 1900s. This past week was another rough one at the southern border. First, it came to light that there were allegations of sexual abuse, neglect, and unhealthy conditions at a holding facility for migrant children in Donna, Texas. When Texas Rangers were sent to investigate, of course, they were denied full access before Department of Homeland Security investigators reportedly took over the investigation. Then on Thursday, Border Patrol in New Mexico reported apprehending fraudulent family units crossing the border in the Yuma sector. In one case, they apprehended a 36-year-old man accompanying an 8-year-old girl whom he had kidnapped in Brazil. All of this is something Biden finally admitted was a crisis on Saturday. But his solution to this crisis, well, on Sunday, the Biden administration announced the opening of yet another child detainment facility at the border. The new facility will reportedly house 372 migrant boys who will also likely be left in plastic cages with foil blankets with only one shower a week. This just gets me so angry. I have a hard time. I just stumble over my words with this. It's absolutely infuriating. But just remember, people, under Trump, while we were able to close these facilities, we're now opening new ones. But at least there are no more mean tweets, right? And who cares about the kids in cages as long as it's Joe Biden putting them there and nobody else? Absolutely disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. Anyway, Maxine Waters, known for her past remarks inciting violence against Trump cabinet officials in 2018, once again engaged in inflammatory rhetoric this past weekend. Waters joined a group of protesters outside of the police station in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota, where she began to incite the crowd, telling them, "We're looking for a guilty verdict," referring to the Derek Chauvin case. "And we're looking to see if all of the talk that took place and has been taking place after they saw what happened to George Floyd, if nothing does not happen, then we know that we've only got to stay in the street, but we've got to fight for justice," and etc. Now, if that wasn't incitement enough for you, when asked what people should do if the jury in the Derek Chauvin trial returns a not guilty verdict, she said, "We've got to stay on the street, and we've got to get more active. We got to get more confrontational. We've got to make sure they know we mean business." Funny, because Democrats like her had been claiming Donald Trump incited violence when he told people to peacefully and patriotically march to the Capitol. Well, Republicans were quick to condemn Waters' latest act of incitement, pointing out that 2 National Guardsmen in Minnesota were injured in a drive-by shooting only a few hours after Maxine Waters made her remarks. Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy on Sunday night put pressure on Nancy Pelosi to take disciplinary action against Waters, tweeting, "Maxine Waters is inciting violence in Minneapolis, just as she has incited it in the past. If Speaker Pelosi does not act against this dangerous rhetoric, I will bring action this week." Well, let's just hope that he does. On Friday, French President Emmanuel Macron paid a visit to Notre Dame Cathedral on the 2nd anniversary of the fire that nearly destroyed the 700-year-old cathedral. It's during this visit he made an announcement that is sure to raise everyone's eyebrows. Notre Dame will be open in 2024, whether or not it is ready. Now, this should raise eyebrows because reconstruction efforts have not yet begun on the cathedral. Engineers are still working to stabilize the stone structure of the cathedral, which was at risk of collapse, and they will be working to stabilize it till the end of 2021. Furthermore, the church will not be fully restored for another 15 or 20 years. However, Macron's 2024 opening date does coincide with France's hosting of the 2024 Summer Olympics. This isn't the first time Macron has tried to leverage Notre Dame's near destruction for his own personal agenda. Immediately after the fire, Macron suggested the cathedral be given an unfaithful rebuild, using modern designs like a glass roof and a steel spire. And there was also a proposal to add an Islamic minaret to the cathedral, despite suspicions the fire had been started by Islamic extremists, which were backed up by the fact that an Islamic extremist group took credit for it. Ultimately, the French Senate defeated the attempts at a modern rebuild, forcing Macron to settle for a traditional reconstruction of the Catholic cathedral. In light of this, though, his remarks seemed to not only show a disregard for the safety of tourists who could be hurt by the possibility of a falling piece of the stone structure, but also a lack of regard for the safety of the landmark itself. And that has been This Week in the News. So now I turn you over to our interview segment with Charles Long. It was a great interview. Charles had a lot to say. I just wish we could have gotten him in for a game. But, of course, I just owe him one down the line should he want to be a guest again at some point in the future. So without further ado, here is Charles Long. Good afternoon, Charles. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. I've been vaccinated and I'm 4 weeks out.
That's excellent. I like your virtual background there, by the way. A lovely tulip orchid. Is that your front yard?
That's my front yard. Yes, it is.
It's excellent. Well, anyway, Charles, my first question for the day is how did you get into politics and what made you run for office the first time you decided to run?
I've sort of been an ancillary to politics for many, many years. I was the president of the Young Republicans in high school back in 1963. And we were campaigning for various Republican representatives in our district around Chicago.
Interesting.
So I've been in and out of politics for maybe 50 years.
It's actually interesting. I didn't know you were from Chicago.
Yeah, I'm from Chicago, and we campaigned for Representative Derwinski, and we also campaigned for Nixon in 1967.
Very nice. So a lot of history there.
Yeah, I've been in and out of it for many years.
It's remarkable too. Not a lot of people stay involved in this stuff for that long. So, in 2020, you didn't actively campaign because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and of course, you had a reason not to. Because of your age and your pre-existing health conditions, you had reasonable concerns about the virus. So, I just want to ask, how frustrating was this for you, on the one hand, trying to run for a city council seat in the hopes of making Baltimore a better place to live, and on the other, having to be cautious of this virus that almost certainly would have taken your life?
Well, I have a number of issues with Baltimore. First of all, the water service is bad. I don't like the way we get water in Baltimore. Baltimore County gets the same water and they pay half or 1/3 what we pay. And I think there needs to be a complete revision of the water service in Baltimore.
Mm, I definitely agree.
And another issue I have is Comcast. Comcast has a monopoly in Baltimore for high-speed wideband internet. I don't think that should be. I think there should be competition for high-speed wideband internet.
Oh, I definitely agree. I mean, I'm stuck with Comcast right now, and it's not a great thing. So this must have been very frustrating for you. By the way,
It's
Comcast, I'm
very
in no way
frustrating.
criticizing you.
Really frustrating. And I wanted to get into city council and I wanted to put my views forth on this broadband internet business because we could get FiOS, we could get all kinds of things, but the city council won't allow it.
It's despicable. And so among that, you decided to run, and you also ran in 2016
There's
too.
another reason I decided to run, and that Mary Pat Clark retired. And I admired Mary Pat Clark. She was a good person, but she retired, and I wanted to take over her council position.
Mm-hmm. And the woman who's in charge of the position now, Odette Ramos, what are your thoughts about her?
I don't like any of her policies.
Mm. Yeah, she seems to be part of this new crowd of city council members that
Yes.
are just going farther and farther left, which is interesting because it's just gotten so ridiculous and stuff. For those of my viewers who don't know, the last Republican city council member in Baltimore was actually a Jewish Republican, and ever since then it's just skewed further and further towards whatever the flavor of the Democrat Party of the day is, and it's just it definitely
It seems as
reflects.
though the city council members do not pay attention to the average citizen in Baltimore. They just don't pay attention. They don't care about the average citizen.
They don't. I was talking with Michelle Andrews about this last week. They seem more interested in pursuing their pet projects than they do about actually addressing the issues of the city. They're removing statues while kids are not getting a proper education, and they think that it's a priority removing lifeless hunks of metal or putting in bike lanes when, the city has an issue with, a monopoly on their internet, bad water, like you said, and our educational system just completely in tatters.
We have kids graduating from high school in Baltimore City who cannot read and write.
It's ridiculous. It really is. And it's just a shame, that constantly we have Baltimore voters complain about this. And they vote in the same kind of thing year after year. I mean, it definitely
And
works for people in like Roland Park, but it's not
William,
working for the majority of the rest of the city.
William, the streets in Baltimore need repair. We need infrastructure repair to the streets in Baltimore.
Mm, well, that's for sure. I live right off of Druid Park Drive, and that's an absolute shambles. So there's a lot going on there that you were looking to change, right?
Absolutely. I wanted to put my 2 cents forward in order to get something done in this city.
Mm. And we definitely need people who actually were concerned. Now, I want to ask you about one of your earlier races. In 2014, you ran against John Sarbanes, and while you did end up losing that race, you still didn't. You pulled in 40% of the vote, which is more than
Wait a minute, it was 41%. Wait a minute, William, it was
41%.
41%.
Thank you for correcting me.
Yes,
You pulled in
41.
41% of the vote, which is way more than any Republican candidate had pulled in that district in the last decade. So, what part of your campaign do you think contributed to your popularity with the voters in the 2014 election that no other Republican has pulled yet?
First of all, I knocked on 5,000 doors and I talked to at least 3,000 people. Second of all, John Sarbanes is a do nothing person. I don't know what he does. He just does nothing. And next thing is, I went around campaigning door to door with my granddaughter. This was a 9-year-old girl who is cute as a button. And people just came out and talked to me like you wouldn't believe. They wanted jobs, they wanted economic stability, they wanted a reasonable thing that people in Baltimore would want. And they just poured their hearts out to me.
That's so basically old fashioned elbow grease. You put the work in.
Absolutely. I went door to door with palm cards with my granddaughter.
Hmm. And again, you performed much better than any Republican has in the district in the past decade, and so that was amazing and stuff. That in itself is an achievement. Um, and that's kind of what we need is more of this thing where you resonate with the voters, where people are putting in more of the time going door to door than just doing press conferences. The thing, not that I'm, decrying press conferences or anything. They're important,
Also,
but
William, William, when I campaigned against Sarbanes, I had an incredible campaign manager, Michael Robinson.
Michael
This
Robinson.
guy, this guy really pushed. He was a Democrat, but he wanted me in there. He wanted somebody that would be active against Sarbanes. He gave videos. He puts all kinds of stuff on the internet, and he was a marvelous person. One thing is, he wanted the penalty for marijuana to be much reduced. He really campaigned against that.
Interesting. So there are two ingredients there: elbow grease and bipartisanship.
Yes.
Hmm. It's interesting. I mean, you don't get a lot of bipartisanship these days. It seems to be
No,
attack the other party
he,
and stuff.
he was the campaign manager for Jeffrey Mollett, who was the Democratic opponent to John Sarbanes. When Jeffrey Mollett lost the primary, he came to me because I won the primary.
Hmm. I mean, still, it's remarkable that he was even willing to work with a Republican. Because again, you just don't get that these days and stuff. I'm sure it's just been getting like much worse with the Democrats attacking their opponents and stuff. And I mean, now we're getting to the point where they're outright, openly talking about packing the Supreme Court for political reasons because in their minds the court's broken because the Republicans had three legitimate judicial appointments, and it's absolutely it's a good thing to hear that at least at some point, there was this kind of bipartisanship where somebody could cross the aisles to work with their with somebody who might not totally agree with them. Just it's again really good thing to remember. So, out of all your years campaigning and running for office, is there any one person or event that really stuck out to you in your mind that you remember to this day?
Well, I remember this guy, Michael Robinson, of course, because he was my campaign manager and he was across the aisle. But yeah, a very good friend of mine, Richard Baum, was he's a Naval Academy graduate. He served in the Navy for many years, and he and I keep contact. He lives in Boston.
Mm-hmm.
He and I keep contact very, very closely, and he's really concerned about how this nation is going because he's a Naval Academy graduate, for goodness sakes. And he just called me today and he said he's worried about Joe Biden appointing more members to the Supreme Court, like he's going to pad the court.
Basically, I mean, on top of that, he's a member of the armed forces, and right now, Biden's administration, especially his Department of Defense, seems to be attempting to purge the military of what they call extremists, but apparently is just anybody without a left leaning political opinion. So that's distressing in itself, too.
It sure is.
I mean, they're talking about packing courts. They want to add two Senate seats to the Senate so that they have an advantage. They're talking about purging the military. It's looking more and more like they're openly and unapologetically seeking to create a dictatorship where they are perpetually in charge.
I agree. And I don't want it.
I don't think most Americans want it. I think only a small percentage of elites want it. Because Democrats, they seem to be obsessed with Europe and stuff. I mean, even as far back as the Civil War, Europe were their allies. Great Britain was doing trade with the Confederacy and stuff. And it seems ever since then, the Democrats, policy-wise, have always been driven towards getting our country more and more like Europe, which which our ancestors escaped from. And so it's really a ridiculous arc there.
It seems as though Europe is going socialist. The entire population of Europe seems to want socialism.
Well, exactly. And again, where Europe moves, the Democrats seem to. It's. I mean, it's really bad in Europe too. Like for example,
Germany, think of Germany. They are so socialist, and France is going that way too.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Now Britain.
I mean, a couple of years ago when Notre Dame burned down, the French president wanted them to go and rebuild it with like modern art and a Islamic minaret, even though there were suspicions at the time that an Islamic extremist group went after the cathedral and stuff. So it seems like, that entire continent is going into the gutter and stuff, and the Democrats want to take us right along with that continent and stuff.
I agree.
Uh, it's definitely, there's some dark days ahead of us, and it's something we need to remain vigilant on, and hopefully.
What's your last question?
My last question is, what do you love most about Baltimore, Charles? What aspect of this city sets it apart from any other city you've lived in or been to?
First of all, I lived in Chicago for many years. I grew up in Chicago. And at that time, there were 3 million people in Chicago, and I found it too big. I like the fact that Baltimore is only 650,000 people. It's a small, close-knit community. And I like that the neighborhoods. I belong to Tuscany Canterbury neighborhood, and there are many cohesive neighborhoods in Baltimore. That is extremely rewarding. Also, the restaurants in Baltimore are very diverse. We have Highlandtown, we have Greektown, we have an incredible diversity of restaurants in this city, and I find it very stimulating.
That's an interesting way of looking at it. And I like how you said we've got these close-knit communities. It is rewarding and stuff to have these communities that have a sense of identity for each different community.
That's right. Exactly. Every community seems to be a group that can get something done.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I do have to admit, though, in recent years, especially with a bunch of people from out of town moving in and gentrification, some communities are starting to lose their original character, like Hamden. I grew up in Hamden, and I can tell you the neighborhood's not like it was when I was a kid, and that's not necessarily a good thing, but...
Well, there's Butcher Hill, there's Mount Vernon, there's Federal Hill, there's Fells Point. These are all magnets of attraction.
Oh, yeah, and definitely those neighborhoods do seem to have kept their character. There's also Pigtown's definitely kept its character for a long time. They still have their festival down there and everything. So it's just some of the northern ones seem to be having this issue where people move in and the neighborhood changes, like Hamden, Remington.
Well, that might be true of Canton. Have you
Oh, Canton's definitely the big
Canton?
one. Oh, yes.
It's gentrified. Canton is gentrified.
Absolutely gentrified, and somehow it gets worse. I actually had an incident in Canton a few years ago where, I was impressed by how gentrified it was, but then, while getting into a friend's car in the parking lot, I accidentally stepped in a pile of human excrement. So while things get better, things also get a little worse, because I can tell you when I was a kid going through industrialized Canton and stuff, stepping in a pile of human excrement was the last thing I expected to happen.
Yeah. I'll tell you an incident. I was down at the Science Center with my grandchildren,
Mm-hmm.
and I paid the $20 fee to get in, and they gave me $20 back.
Really?
Yeah. So after I was in the Science Center, I walked up to Pratt and Lombard, and there was a beggar there, and I gave him the $20, and that was the biggest thing of his life.
That's really generous and stuff too. I mean, generosity. We definitely need to see more of it in the city. Of course, we need to see more of it from our politicians first. I will say that with the poor in Baltimore, it's a severe issue, and you've seen the city do things in the past that are counterproductive. I know they used to allow the poor to stay in the park near St. Vincent de Paul Church, and they don't do that anymore, much to the...
That's cleaned out. Yeah, I saw that's cleaned out.
Yeah, much to the disappointment of the priest there at the time, Father Lawrence, who is no longer with us, unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
Oh, yes, he was a good man. Good man. I knew him personally. I don't know if you ever got a chance to know him, Charles.
No, I didn't. I didn't know him, but I'm sure he was a good person.
Extremely good person. Well, anyway, Charles, it was great having you on today, and enjoyable. The thoughts you shared about Baltimore and everything were absolutely different and in a good way. And that's what I've enjoyed about these interviews is each city council candidate I've interviewed so far has had something different. And you have an experience that nobody else I've interviewed so far has, because you've not only run for city council twice now in 2016 too, but you've run as a congressional candidate. And so I'd like to say thank you for your service and thank you for your love for the city.
Okay. Thanks, William.
You have a good afternoon, Charles.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. Well, that was a great interview. And, I didn't even need to ask Charles if he plans on running again. I think he will. Now, as I said earlier, we're doing a skit independent of the interview because I didn't have time to prepare things. So here is one I've been wanting to do for a while. Here's the world premiere of a little skit that is sure to amuse you all. Sorry, we're having some audio issues here. Today's skit is Great Moments in American History. Pretty interesting, right? So today's skit will be George Washington's crossing of the Delaware. On the night of December 25th, 1776, George Washington led his forces across the Delaware in a daring attack against Hessian forces stationed in Trenton, New Jersey. Under harrowing winter conditions, George and his army crossed the river, uncertain of the thickness of the ice or whether or not the British had caught on to their plan. Their operation was a success, however, and led to the defeat of Lord Cornwallis and his forces on January 2nd, 1777. However, the history books forgot to mention one key hazard Washington and his troops overcame during their daring river crossing. Their wives came along, and they wouldn't stop nagging. George? George, are we there yet? Be quiet, Martha. The Germans will hear us. It's bloody cold, George. Can we stop for tea? Bloody hell, woman. We're in the middle of a river trying to attack the Hessian mercenaries. If you don't shut your damn trap, they will hear us, and then the jig is up. You care about that smelly horse more than you do me. Bloody hell, woman. I told you the battlefield is no place for wives. And yet you begged me to come. You could have stayed home and had tea there. And let you have all the fun, not on your sweet fanny. This is not fun, Martha. This is our war of independence. That's what all the husbands say. Right, Henrietta? Right, love. That is the last bloody straw. New rule, men. No bringing our wives into the battle. Sexist. Why, you Martha? Damn, we're about to land. Ready, men? To battle. All together now. No more wives. And so George Washington sailed off into the sunset, into a wonderful victory against the British, which will be remembered in the history books, but not so much the nagging of his wife. I know I'm probably going to get some complaints for that little skit, although I think some people are just going to be impressed that I can do that varied range of voices. Anyway, it has been an amazing program today, despite my little snafu here. Anyway, I'm glad you all tuned in, and hopefully next week we're going to have a bit of more success with the planning. In any case, it was great having you on today, Charles, and I hope to have you on again soon in the future. And for my listeners, thanks for sticking with me this week, and hopefully we'll have something better next week than stupid jokes about nagging wives in the Revolutionary War. Anyway, this has been the Weekly Roundup, and as your host, I'd like to say have a great week, and I will see you next week.